to Alan.
And can everyone see my screen? Okay. I seem like everyone can see my screen. Okay, good. Excellent, good. Again, my name is Alan Silverberg. Please call me Alan, and I have the pleasure of leading today's webinar on taking control of your job search in today's job market. Just let me give you a very quick sense of my background. I've been a career coach now for the last 28 years. It's actually my third career. I started my career in accounting, which gave me a good sense of the business world, moved into recruitment, and thought I'd be helping people, but found that I was actually helping companies. And being a career coach got to be the fulfillment I was looking for in terms of being able to help people. And I've worked with people in all industries, professions, levels, and all aspects of the job search, and in all job markets as well. And I must say that this is among the most unusual job markets that people have faced. And based upon that, despite that, and that's not euphemistic for like it's a bad job market. I have seen worse job markets. Despite the incredible rise in unemployment, despite the horrible disruption that we're all living through, I'm working with people who are landing jobs. But as I said, it's unusual, and I'll go through more detail of that. It's not easy, so it requires more skill. So that's what we're going to talk through today. And by the way, I'm local. I live in Valley Cottage, and I'm in Nyack all the time. So this is very much something that I wanted to do to make sure I was giving back to my community, because I just think this is such an important time to do that. So obviously you guys are muted, and as Rosemary said, and thank you for the introduction, Rosemary, please ask questions via chat. As you're already doing, you should have already seen the sample resume and cover letter. If you need that, you're going to send your email to Rosemary now. But otherwise, you could send me an email at takecontroljobsearch2020@yahoo.com. And in addition to today's session, as I mentioned in the lead up, anyone who's attending today, I am more than happy to review their resume. So please take down that email. It'll show at the end as well. Please send me a copy of your resume, because I'm happy to give you feedback on that. In terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover the entire job search process. And I've been, as I said, doing this for well over 20 years. This process has worked for that entire time. The best job search is about developing an action plan. And any good action plan would have clear goals. So in this case, it's about having clear career goals and using marketing principles of which to execute and develop and implement that plan. So what does that boil down to in just some manageable terms? Well, it's about having a clear career goal, and I'll talk about what that is. And I'll talk about how to do that effectively in this market, because as I said, it's an unusual market. Based upon that goal, naturally you want to develop the strongest materials for your job search: resumes, LinkedIn profiles, cover letters. And at its best, using marketing principles, those documents should be sales brochure that position you well for the roles that you're going after. Well, that's all great. You've got a clear goal, you've got good materials. That's the start. You've got to be able to use all job search methods and use them effectively, particularly networking. I'll talk about this more than once, but networking accounts for how 3 out of 4 people locate jobs. So it's incredibly important. And it's one of those terms that we talk about, but people often misunderstand what it is. And doing all that work week after week to try to generate activities by networking in all the job search means, you're going to generate interviews, and naturally you want to be ready for that so you could land jobs. So, okay, but you will be the ones to do all of this. So therefore, your abilities to implement this plan is essential. And going through a job search is never easy. It's never, even in the best of times, and we are not in the best of times now. And some of you, given the incredible rise in unemployment, may be going through this job search having lost a job recently. I work with people in those circumstances all the time, and I am very sorry to hear if that is the case for any of you. But having worked with people all the time, I can say confidently that people do work through it. But it's not easy. As people go through a job loss, you know, they often feel as if they've been like punched in the stomach. That's the reaction I get all the time. And they go through a process that's akin to processing significant losses in people's lives, you know, relating to you know, losing a loved one, going through a divorce. I mean, that's how significant the loss is. And there's been studies done on that topic, and they find that as people first go through that loss, the first reaction often is one of shock, surprise, maybe some level of denial, you know, not believing this actually happening. And on some level, that reaction protects us because we're not ready to fully take in what's happening. And then as we take it in, we fight it. Some people get sad, some people get angry. Then from there, some people might blame others, or they might feel guilty for something they did or didn't do. And all of those are incredibly normal reactions, wrestling with what's been occurring. But you deserve better than all that because you deserve to move forward. So the more you could push yourself to move forward, the stronger you will be. And believe it or not, as you start to feel fear, I actually see that as a positive step, which says how awful a process this is. The fear is a positive step here. Because if you're feeling fear, at least you're beginning to look towards the future. But as you feel that fear, you want to find ways to steady yourself, really, get yourself grounded and dig in, use your grit and your persistence to be able to focus on some level of acceptance and figure out how you're going to move forward. And on some level, if you simply force yourself to move forward, it's going to force you to a place of acceptance. And once you get to that point of beginning to accept, you can start to really use that fear to inform you and understand what you're actually scared of. And then that'll prompt you to problem solve. So if you're scared that perhaps your skills are not as current as they can, okay, maybe it'll prompt you to take some classes in professional development. You're scared that you're not as ready as a job search. Well, that's why I'm here today. And that's why you're going to have a recording of this as well. So you're going to have, you have some resources here to help you. So, recognize that you could tackle any problem once you start to identify it. And as I mentioned a moment ago, any good plan is going to start with some clear career goals. And as you have those goals, it's going to prompt you to then start to take some meaningful actions in your job search. And as you start to take those actions, though, and particularly as you dig into really pursuing new jobs, it's a challenging process. I'm sorry, that was too weak a word. It's a frustrating process. You're waiting a lot for responses. You're getting rejection. So it's hard to stay motivated and consistent. So you want to make sure that you develop a new daily routine for your job search. Schedule time of what you commit to do each day. Set goals yourself around your activity. I'll talk about what that activity should be. And find ways to keep yourself motivated and inspired. For some people, it's putting up inspirational quotes. For others, it's reading something, or it's watching a video, or I had a client who watched inspirational movies like Rudy and Rocky, and he landed a great job. So it worked. Continually learn, and that will make you feel productive. Take a walk, exercise. All of that will keep you going. Find a job search buddy, all of which will keep you going, because your ability to be productive each day is perhaps the greatest asset you have in your job search. Now, as I talked about these emotional reactions and how you have to move past the anger and sadness, well, I'm sorry to say that as something happens in your job search that doesn't go as well, some of these emotions may kick back in. Recognize it, and quickly as you can, move forward to, okay, I'm going to focus on moving forward. I can let go of that anger. I deserve better. It's really about taking care of yourself. Believe me, the reasons you're feeling it, they're justified, but take care of yourself. Okay. So, as I said, this action plan starts with a clear career goal. So, what do I mean by that? It needs to be specific enough that as you say it to people, they can help you achieve it. So, that means you want to define what position that you want. It doesn't have to be the exact job title, because job titles may change a bit from company to company, but you want to know what you want to do. And you want to choose the industry or industries of which you want to do this in. In a moment, I'll talk more about some industries to target based upon the ones that are stronger now. And this is very much part of what makes it such an unusual market. It's in a job market of the have and have nots. And of course, you want to choose where you want to work. And I would also include in that, can you and do you want to work remotely? Because of course, there's a growing number of remote positions. Well, it's nice to choose that job, but you want to make sure that what you're choosing is realistic. Now, you're not limited to the work that you've done before, and particularly if you happen to unfortunately be in an industry that's incredibly disrupted by this world, restaurant industry, hospitality industry, brick and mortar retail. There are several industries that have really been far harder hit and not going to recover as rapidly. So you may want to think about, do you want to make a shift right now? So you have to, if you're doing that, you have to think of what you've done as more than just the job title and the company. You have to, peel back that onion a little bit and understand what you actually do in that job, and how that can help other organizations. That's what that term transferable skills actually means. Then as you start to define that, maybe you want to look onto job postings and see what jobs fit that. Go into sites like ONET Online. ONET is a tool put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics that helps with that. So that would be something that could be of help to you to figure that out. And so you have to then be able to say, okay, is this realistic? Can I tell that story of how I fit this new role? Because ultimately, that's what you'll be able to have to do. Now, as I mentioned, it's a market of the have and have nots. No surprise. As I was describing some areas that were difficult in brick and mortar retail, well, guess what? What shrunk in brick and mortar has been rising in terms of online businesses of all kinds. Products, services, entertainment, education. Also, any business that supports online, supply chain logistics companies, distributors, online payment companies. Another growing field has been healthcare. It's remained strong. Healthcare products, healthcare services, healthcare information, telehealth. It's said that the telehealth industry, its growth has been accelerated by 3 to 5 years, as an example. So also essential goods. Now, I've had people land jobs at a company called RB or Reckitt Benckiser. They're the manufacturers of Lysol. They've done very well right now. No surprise. So those businesses have done incredibly well. So as you're looking to make a shift, it's easier to look to do a job similar to what you've done in a business that's growing. And what's also a couple of more growing trends, no surprise, remote roles. And even if the job is only remote now, many companies may be open to keeping that job remote. That may not be, you may not know that, but I would go after it, particularly if you're not working now. It may be a risk worth taking. You want to evaluate that for yourself. And also, in this time of incredible uncertainty in the business market, there's a larger percentage of contract roles. We're coming from a market that was otherwise very healthy to a time of who knows what's going on now and who knows what's going to happen next. But some needs exist. Companies aren't ready to hire people full-time, but if they need someone now, they'll take on a temporary contract worker. So if you can be open to that, even if you're goal is to land ultimately a full-time job, that could be a great way in to an organization that might become your full-time employer. Okay. So I'm going to talk about how people run jobs in a little while, but I'm going to pause my PowerPoint right now. And now that we've talked about goals, I want to talk about how to present those goals and how to position yourself on a resume. Because as I said a moment ago, your resume is a sales brochure, so it should be positioning you for the job that you want next. And so as you're writing it, you're consciously thinking about, is what I'm writing relevant to the audience based upon the role and an industry? So if you're shifting industries, you're getting rid of any language or terms that won't be understood outside your industry. And so you're making sure the language is neutral. You're still including what you've done, of course, but you're making sure that the language is not it will be easily understood. And you're not writing it based upon what was most important to your last employer. It's based upon the role that you're pursuing and what you think that next employer will want to see in you. But keep in mind that as you're writing your resume, the goal of the resume is not to land you a job. It's to land you an interview. And because of that, it allows you to keep it relatively brief. 1 to 2 pages is very much the norm. And in addition to thinking about this in terms of 1 to 2 pages, keep in mind the first time a person actually reads this resume, they're reading it in all likelihood for all of 6 to 30 seconds. So you better grab their attention right away. And that means you have to grab their attention within the first half of page 1. So based upon that, now I'm going to sort of talk through the different sections of the resume. And this should have been emailed to you, so you have this as well. So among the things you want to be able to include is your contact info. I'm including all of it in 2 lines. Why? Because within 6 to 30 seconds, I don't want them spending 5 lines reading my contact info. Name on top, bold, great, a little bit larger, font. Basic information. Email address. Consciously, I chose a Gmail account. You may have another email provider. My wife has an old AOL account, but for her mixed media art, she uses Gmail because she needs to be current. In a job search, you need to be current. So make sure your email provider looks current. And keep it simple. First name dot last name, first initial last name, and add the birth data to make it work. Cell number, you don't have to label it a cell number. People will know it's a phone number. City and state is all you need. You don't need your full street address. People became concerned around identity theft. It's just no longer, so it's no longer needed. From there, you want to have a summary. Now I want to talk about the summary now, but let me mention that although it's the first thing that you see written on the page, it's the last thing that I write for people. Why? Because after I've written the resume, I'm much better able to summarize it. So I recommend that you do the same. So what does the summary do? It tells the person what you want to do right up front. It starts with that nice generic job title. You know that this person wants to be a marketing and business development leader. They don't need an objective. And then from there, they're building upon what makes them strong and unique for this role, what they've done, and some of the elements that might be important. Below that, they've got a brief skills section. And as it's instructed here, they're adding skills to precisely match the language of the job posting. This is the only section that I recommend that you customize for each job posting. Because before a human reads your resume will be read by an applicant tracking system. And it'll be read based upon the query terms that a human puts in. Likely someone in the human resource department. What are they likely to put in? Well, whatever they wrote in their job posting. So give yourself the best chance of becoming highest ranked by including the same information. Okay. So then you want to talk about your experience. You don't need to tell your entire work history, only what's relevant. As a guideline, the last 10 to 15 years tend to be the most relevant. That's a guideline. If you did something incredibly valuable to what you want to do next 20 years ago, include it. If it's less, that's okay too. But as you go further and further back, typically you're going to say less because people are going to focus on what you've done recently, and typically that would be the most important. Company name to the left, typically bolded, city and state, dates to the right, job title. And then below that, there's a lot short bulleted items. Those bulleted items start with an action verb. I highlighted them in blue, develop and execute in this case. And then from there, I said what they developed and executed. And I also then asked myself the question, or Nancy asked herself the question, of what was the impact of this work? And what were the results? And then she added tangible results. Whenever you can, add tangible results. At the least, ask yourself, what was the impact of this work? Even if it's qualitative and not tangible in terms of measurable numbers, always add that. And sometimes the result is simply preventing a problem from happening. That's just as valuable. So you kept the system up and running. You kept the company in compliance and met regulatory reporting deadlines. Great, that's hugely important. That was the goal. And include results. It's not that you caused the result personally, but include any results that your work was a part of, that you contributed to. And if you don't have a precise number, it's okay to make a reasonable estimate. Not a wild guess, but a reasonable estimate, because you may have to speak to that number. But you do want to include numbers. You also have the option to break up these bulleted items based upon functional sections. So if Nancy was pursuing jobs both in marketing and brand development, as well as sales management, people can easily see that she has that sales management experience. She could even move that section on top. Then she's going further and further back, and she's got some really good experience early on, but it's not as relevant to her current goal because they're with much larger companies. So she didn't detail that, and that was a way to keep this shorter. Below that, she's got education. She also has professional development. She could have had that as two separate sections. But in this case, her formal education was in financial management, and she's in marketing now. So her professional development was much more relevant in terms of digital marketing, web development. So therefore, she highlighted that in the same section. And also, by the way, that allowed her to keep this all to one page. So all told, this happened to be one page. 2 pages is fine, but make sure you're grabbing their attention that first half of page 1, and that's why that top section is so important. While we have moved away from the PowerPoint presentation, let me go through just a couple of other items here. I just want to make sure that you can see this. So I also pulled up a basic template for a cover letter, and people will often ask me, do you think most will read cover letters? My answer is no. My guess is that around 20–25% of people are reading cover letters. But yet I always recommend that you include it. A couple of reasons. One, you never know, if the person you're sending it to is part of that 20–25%. But what happens far more consistently is that cover letter gets included in your application, that gets uploaded into that company's applicant tracking system. And it's another opportunity for you to add some language that matches up precisely to the same terms that they may be searching on. And you're going to do that, not in that really brief top section that just says the job you're applying for, not in that bottom section that says I'm interested in the job, but in the middle section where you're writing a couple of specific bullets that match up very well to the job you're applying for. So it's the same language, and therefore will again further improve your ranking when they're trying to do a query on that applicant tracking system. So you hope to be higher ranked and noticed. Now, I'm going to talk about all the job search methods in a moment, but I'm going to use this opportunity to introduce LinkedIn. Some of you maybe have varying levels of knowledge on that, but I'm going to speak to it now. And I trust that you all can now see my LinkedIn profile, professionally taken picture, but you don't need a professionally taken picture. And let me just speak to what LinkedIn is. LinkedIn is a, obviously it's social media, but it's really for business terms. So not a particularly big fan of social media, but I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn because it's incredibly helpful for people in their job search. And it's incredibly well used. Globally, it's used by over 100 million people. So it used to be that it was a nice benefit to have LinkedIn. Now it's at a point where if you're not on LinkedIn, you're probably putting yourself at a disadvantage unnecessarily. Because when recruiters are looking for people, and recruiters both outside of companies and inside of companies, in all likelihood, their first stop is LinkedIn. So if you've got a strong LinkedIn profile, you're putting yourself in a great position for them to find you. Unfortunately, the opposite is also true. So give yourself that advantage. But having developed a strong resume, you'll be in a great position to do that. You'll be able to create a headline for yourself. And you could make this much simpler than I did. I talked about landing jobs faster and achieving career satisfaction. Depending on my profession, I simply could have just wrote career coach. Below that, I have a section labeled about, which you will have as well. It's very much similar to what people would write in their resume, in that summary section, except it should be first person. And then you start to have your experience. I'm including first my experience as a private career coach. So that is a little bit more of a narrative in first person, because again, I'm speaking directly to an audience. My second entry here is a more traditional job that I had. And so it's going to have bullets that would look much like a job that I would have, on a resume. And I want to do the same thing and say less and less as I go further back. I didn't follow that rule of going back only 15 years. I went back 28 years. Why? Because as a career coach, I don't get penalized for being more experienced. And it's all relevant to the work that I do. So that's why I included it. After that comes my education. I also included some of my professional development work because my education was in accounting. That's where I started my career. So I made sure to include the other work there too. Now, on your resume, I recommended that you customize your skills job posting by job posting. LinkedIn does them differently. It gives you the opportunity to list 50 skills. So as you're figuring out what job postings you're answering, look for those phrases, look for those buzzwords, and add up to 50 skills that look just like those jobs. LinkedIn also gives the ability to get a couple of recommendations. Do so, that's a nice bonus. You can choose to follow some groups as well. And if there's some items that are volunteer work or don't neatly fit into other parts of your background, make sure what you're including in terms of volunteer work will be seen neutrally. You don't want anything that's too polarizing there. That's great. And LinkedIn, other than your resume, will have a picture on top. I always recommend including a picture. I've heard studies that say that profiles with pictures get 7 times the looks of those without. Now, I would expect it to be higher. I never would expect it to be that high. It should be professional looking, but it doesn't need to be professionally taken. Dress in clothes that you'd wear in an interview, stand against a blank wall and have someone take a picture with your phone. It'll be fine. You have the option to add a background picture. If not, LinkedIn will default to a picture. You also want the other value of LinkedIn is that you can use it to network. And I'll talk more about how to network effectively in a couple of minutes. I've said that word at least 4 times now. I get paid by how much I get to say that word, just so you know. In all seriousness, networking is the key to your search. And to be able to target who to network, the larger your connection base on LinkedIn, the easier it becomes. So you want to have as many connections as possible. And your connections, of course, you'll think to include people that you're connected to in the work that you've done, or work that you do now. That's great. But it's not limited to that. It's your friends and family and neighbors and relatives. And you're maybe thinking, well, they have nothing to do with me professionally. Why should I connect to them on LinkedIn? Well, the reason you want to do that is that the way LinkedIn works, the people that you choose to connect to, and it's always a mutual acceptance. So if you send an invitation, someone else has to accept. If someone sends you an invitation, you have to choose to accept. That's how it works. There's also many other privacy settings. Well, each of those connections that you add, each of them have their own set of connections. And LinkedIn allows you to look 3 levels out. So your immediate connections are your first level connections. Their connections are your second level connections. And from there, it's your third level connections. And that adds up to a lot of people. So I'll talk more about this in a moment. When you answer a job posting, you'll be one of many. When you network your way in, you'll be one of extremely few. LinkedIn will be the key to helping you figure out how you can almost always network your way into a company. And let me give you an example of that. So let me pick a local company that's a large employer, Avon Products, and I'm going to add the words in people. Because when I do that, it's going to do a search through my network of Avon people connected to Avon Products in people. As I just hit those words, I came up with this outrageous number of over 19,000, close to 20,000 people. So I want to start to narrow that down because I can. So okay, I've got 19,000 people. Let me find people who only work there. Good. Now I got to 3,200 people. Way too many. So still, let me now narrow it down to local people. LinkedIn will include our area in the New York City metropolitan area. So I'll include that. It'll include New York City too. Great. And now I've got to 130 results. If I wanted to, I could narrow that down further. So let's say I worked in finance. I could add the word finance here. And I got it down to 9 results. And so I could now reach out to Sabrina, who works in Avon Finance, if I'm looking to get a job in the finance area of Avon. And I'm probably among those few people who do that. Now, I don't know Sabrina. She's listed as a second level contact, but I know someone in common with her. So that gives me a route to be able to do that. Okay. Having described a bit about some of these tools, let me go back to talking about how people actually find jobs. So this will start to make some sense. Okay. As I've been describing, there are several ways that people find jobs. Among them will include job postings. But that's a small percentage of success. And these statistics come from, studies done by the Harvard Business School, the New York Times, and the US Department of Labor. So you don't want to spend most of your energy on something that only works 10% of the time. Make it easy for yourself. Go to a site like Indeed.com, because Indeed.com aggregates jobs from all across the web. It pulls in their own jobs, jobs from company sites, jobs from recruiter sites, jobs from other job search sites. LinkedIn will also have its job function, and that could help too. And they don't often get aggregated, so that all makes sense too. But keep in mind, when you answer a job posting, these are pretty easy to see. So likely you're one of 100, 150 people who answered that job. And companies won't respond right away. Don't think, oh my God, my background's not online. No, they're simply collecting the resume. Companies often collect these resumes for around 4 to 6 weeks before they reach out to anyone. And then they're going to query that applicant tracking system to find that those who are best ranked. So customize those skills to put yourself in the best position to do that. And that little section of that resume right below the summary. Another means of finding jobs are recruiters. Recruiters are there to provide a service to the hiring company. They're not against you, but they're not there to help you. They're there to help the hiring company. Effectively, you're their candidate pool. You're their inventory to help you do that. And they are very focused on not helping you, but filling an open job. If that happens to be with you, great. But now keep that in mind, and set your expectations accordingly. Because when you fit an open job, they're going to talk to you day and night. If that changes, for whatever reason, the job gets filled, the job gets put on hold, they hired someone internally, the specs changed, they're going to ignore you. It has nothing to do with you, nothing you did wrong, just the nature of the beast, and nothing wrong with them. That's their job. Now, as I mentioned, a significant percentage of jobs now are people getting hired in temporary or contract roles, and certainly those roles are in a great position to turn into full-time positions as the market continues to improve, or as those companies continue to improve. So if you can be open to that, and since almost every company doesn't want temporary or contract people directly on their payroll, they hire them via recruiters. So that's another means of recruiters. Focus on recruiters who specialize in doing what you want to do next, because that's the only time of which you're going to be the perfect matches. So keep that in mind, and look for ways to find them through job postings. Look for ways to talk to people who have similar backgrounds to you, and they may know some recruiters who they trust and like. As I've been mentioning, networking is how most people find jobs, 75%. So, because when you're networking your way into a company, you're facing far, far less competition. You are likely one of less than a handful of people versus 100 to 150. Boy, do I want those odds better. And in addition to that, you're a person. You're not a piece of paper anymore. And let me, start to expand upon that. So this term that's so widely used and often misunderstood starts to make some sense. So why do you want to network? There's this term that's often used, the hidden job market. Boy, do I dislike that term. I prefer to call it the not yet visible job market, because why on earth would companies look to hide jobs they're looking to fill? It's not the case. When companies are ready, they post a job and everyone sees it. But there's some actions that occur before they're ready. Before they're ready, they know that someone's about to be promoted. People in that area know that. They know that someone's about to leave. They know that they're fighting to get some budget approval or reapproval for jobs that were put on freeze and may get reemerge at this time. They know that's likely to happen. They know that they're finalizing a job description, finalizing the level of job, or going through the final discussions of what the salary will be. And in all those times, people in that area of that company go, okay, we think we're about to hire someone. And yet, no job posting is out there for when they're about to hire someone. So that's what I mean by that not yet visible market. You're going to be the insider there. And by definition, you're going to have probably no competition for that, if not extremely few. And even if you're getting there when a job has been posted, well, you're a person, as opposed to an invisible resume inside a database that no one has seen. And as a person, you can tell your own story, and you can describe how you fit what you do, and you can be passionate about it. And in the process, you not only gain visibility, but you become much more credible and likable. And all those specific details of the exact match they were looking for, they're not as important as, hey, I like this person. They're smart. They showed initiative. Let's see what they can do. Let's talk to them more. Let's see if they're right. It's after a while, those hundreds of resumes start to look alike. A person is different. Now, most people you network with won't know of a job right away. You will stumble upon those, but that's not the norm. But in every networking conversation you're in a great position to learn valuable information, and your goal is to gain information. And I'm not saying that with a wink, just so you don't press someone for a job. No, you really do want to gain information. What do you want to learn? You want to learn either about an industry or about a company of which you want to work, where jobs are likely to be. And what are some of the conditions that make job likelier? Well, if a company or an area of a company or a segment of an industry is growing, you're likely to have jobs. If they're going through some changes, they're going to need new skills to cope with that changes. That could be you. If they're making new investments or moving into new physical areas or a new line of business, whatever that might be, they're going to need new people as well. So as you uncover that, you're going to be in a great position to say, okay, those are people I want to speak to, because that growth is going to happen sooner, not later. And that hiring is going to happen sooner, not later. And so, of course, you want to then get introduced to people closer and closer to where those jobs are, including places where you know jobs are right now. So after answering a job posting, always don't sit back and wait for those 4 to 6 weeks. Always network your way in and say, okay, I'm going to get myself on that inside track. Answering the job posting is step 1. Step 2 is networking your way in. It's not hoping that they respond to your posting. Now, that's great that why you want to do it. Why do people want to network with you? Well, most of all, particularly now, people want to help each other. And if they've been through a job search or had friends or loved ones in that situation, they empathize with what you're going through. Our desire to help people has just been activated now. And in addition to that, if they necessarily aren't loyal to you, they may be loyal to the person who recommended them. And guess what? You'll be coming to them for information or advice. So they feel good. They feel like an expert. And they also know either from a karma standpoint or just a very transactional standpoint, if they help you, you're going to help them back. It's reciprocal. And you want to make it as easy as possible. You want to make it clear that you're on a job search. You are not hiding that fact at all. You want to make it clear about the job that you want, but your purpose is to ask for information. And that's not a game. That's really what you want to learn. Let me speak to the step-by-step, really straightforward, of how you'll spend those 15 minutes or so. In all cases, you want to build rapport. If it's someone that you know, it's whatever you'd say if you ran into on the street. These days it's certainly about finding out what's going on in their life. That's the most important thing right now. And you could do that with strangers because people will do that. Empathy is among the greatest skills you should be using in networking and asking how you could be of help to them. But you're on a job search and you want to make that clear. So you want to say what you want to do. And for people that you don't know, connect the dots of how you fit that goal. So make that clear to them. So they see it and say, okay, I get it. People can't give you directions unless they know where you're going. Let them know. Well, I said you're there to get information or advice. To do that, you have to have questions ready. This is your meeting, your agenda. So you're the one who has to make this work. And so you want to have questions ready. If it's a certain company you want to work for, how is the company structured? How is it organized? Which areas of the company or which segments of the industry or which industries do you see are growing? Where is the company making new investments? What changes are most important? And within your profession, what's being valued most? What's hard? What skills are hardest to find? Always ask, how can I be of help to you? As I learn things, as I speak to people, what's helpful to you? From there, they've said, yeah, this section of our company, the B section of our company, that's the area that's going to grow, because they're going to roll out this new product next year. So they're the really ones that are best positioned to go. Wow, that sounds great. I'd love to learn more about that. Can you introduce me to people in that area so I can learn more about it? Not they have a job for you. Again, it's about learning and information. Thank them, keep them involved in your progress, send a thank you note by email. If you know there's a topic of interest, keep in touch about that topic. A month or so later, double back and let them know how you're doing, because they were there to help. The more they're engaged, the more they can be of help. And you could double back and say, I'm now focusing on this industry versus that industry. So, even that's progress. And you can network with the widest range of people possible. A wonderful goal, once you get this moving, is to network with around 5 to 8 people a week. Start by networking people who feel safe and easy to you, but 5 to 8 people a week sounds like a lot. It's 1 to 1.5 per workday if you're doing this full time. I don't know your commitments. But you never know who could help. So start with people safe and easy. Colleagues, of course, would make sense. But if someone is outside your department, they still will know of the industry and companies they work for. Ex-bosses, of course, because they've hired you once, they can hire you again. You don't have to know someone well for them to help you. So professional groups, alumni groups, through universities, through companies you've worked for, professional groups, attend classes. There are many great classes that are free these days. Coursera, EDX offer some free or low-cost classes. Don't ignore your friends, family, and neighbors, even if you know that they have nothing to do with you professionally. You don't know who they know. And the same for people who provide you with services. Because by nature, they're trusted, and by nature of their work, they know lots of people. Doctors, attorneys, clergy, others, financial planners. The more, the better. So here you are, you have clear goals, developed your resume, built that LinkedIn profile, you're out there networking, answering postings, recruiters every week. It's going to generate interviews. Sure as we're sitting here. You sure want to make sure you're ready to sell yourself when you get to those interviews. So ultimately, what's important to interviewers boils down to 3 items. Keep in mind, of course, that when you're being granted an interview, they've invited you for the interview. You've made the hardest cut. You're among probably only 10 people of 100 or more people who've applied for that job. And their 3 concerns are, can you do this job? Do you want the job, and will you fit in? That's it. Now, they're not only asking those words, so you have to interpret all the questions they ask based upon that. How do you do that? Well, your answer always has to be based upon your abilities and or willingness to do that job for that company. So let me quickly go through a couple of questions so you get a feel for that. If someone asks you, what are your future career plans, or where do you see yourself in 5 years, 3 years? Time doesn't matter. They're not concerned about your plans. They want to know that based upon your future plans that you want this job. So my answer is, I'm excited about this job because I'll get to use my skills in blank. My hope is that over time I'll get to grow those skills and make a larger contribution to your department. I'm showing ambition, but I'm showing loyalty, but I don't need to be specific. Who is your ideal boss? Boy, that's a tricky question, because unless your ideal boss sounds just like the person you'd be working for, you fall into a trap. Be less specific here. So my ideal boss is someone who's focused on getting results, but from there, I'm comfortable working with people with a wide variety of styles. Tell me how people why people enjoy working for you. I also asked a question there. I'll talk more about that in a couple minutes. So I gave a nice generic answer, so I didn't fall into a trap. Question like, what are your weaknesses? I have to find something that's not perfect. None of us are. But I don't make it to a problem. I talk about it as a tendency, and I talk about how I manage it. And I look to identify an item that's an overuse of a strength, so it won't surprise them. So if I'm someone who has a high attention to detail, and this is a fictional example, because that ain't me, I might say, I have a tendency to be a perfectionist, but I've learned to manage it by understanding what level of detail is needed, so I know when to stop my work. I know when to stop on any given task. So that gives you a sense of how to think about these standard interview questions and how to answer them. You will also get what's known as behavioral questions or situational questions. And you'll get more and more of these. So you want to have as many, what I'm labeling here, success stories as possible. They're going to be 60-second stories, 3 parts to the story. And I'll go through how you find them in a moment. The first part, really brief, 10, 15 seconds, you're describing why the work was needed. And although it says success stories, this is part of your everyday work. So it could be an everyday situation. You just want to give the story a context. Or it could have been an unusual problem. That's okay. whatever it is, bring the listener right to you. Include them. From there, talk about what you did, your actions, not the team's actions, not the department's actions, your actions. You're the one being interviewed. And then you want to speak to the results that occurred, not caused, because rarely does one person cause that result. Same thing as I was describing on your resume. The results are not yours alone. And it could be those same successes or any problems that you prevented. Those stories, as I said, should be around a minute from beginning to end. First part 10 to 15 seconds, next 30 to 40 seconds, last part 10 to 15 seconds. Okay, so where are you going to get these stories from? Well, every bullet on that resume, Nancy can tell that story. That's the person's name or the resume sample. So she could tell all those stories. You should be able to also, because if you put it on your resume, someone can ask you about an interview. And in doing that, in all likelihood, it's going to speak to almost all the skills you would need for any given job. If it doesn't, add whatever skills you need and have stories ready to speak to that. But good interviews will also ask about difficult situations. So think about the typical difficult situations. What's a conflict that you had with a customer or a colleague? Can you speak about how you faced a situation with too little resources or an impossible deadline? And be able to talk about how you overcame it. And sometimes, so the questions you're going to get could be, tell me about this part of your resume, or it could be illustrate a skill, describe a time when you were innovative, or how did you plan a project? I never would talk about how do I plan a project. I'm going to talk about a project that I planned. Why? Because if I talk about a project that I planned, I get to end with a specific result that was wonderful. If I simply describe it, no result, not nearly as good, not nearly as powerful. And even in situations of conflict, long as it ends up that the conflict was resolved and everything worked out happily ever after, that's what the result is, and it works out fine. Be diplomatic how you describe that conflict as well. That's important. Okay. As I've been mentioning, you want to ask questions throughout the interview. I like to think about this as the question, answer, question technique. So they ask you a question, you answer back, you answer, and then you ask a question back. The question back is always about the interviewer's needs, because in general, you are there to focus on their needs, not yours. And as long as that's the case, the question will be welcome, because you're building this nice bond and showing interest in them and showing you want to help. That's your goal. But strategically, by asking that question, you know what's important to them. So if someone asked me, give me an example of when you were innovative, I've given them a success story of when I've innovated, and then I ask what innovation is needed. Someone asked me, how do I plan a project? I give them a story about a project that I planned and ask, how do I plan a project there? Early on, I'm going to ask some big picture questions. What are the goals of this position? What are the challenges? What are the greatest needs? Why? The faster I learn that, the faster I know what to speak to. And they're still going to say at the end, do you have any questions? Your answer should be yes, because otherwise it would sound odd. And there are two important questions to ask to make sure, first of all, that you've accomplished everything you wanted to in that interview. And you do that by asking, is there anything else about my background that you need to know? Because if there's anything they forgot to ask, or anything that they're still not convinced of, it's going to come out right there. And this is going to be an ongoing process. In many cases, you're going to go to 4 to 6 rounds of interviews and maybe meet with upwards of 6 to 10 people. So your goal is not to land the job in an interview, but to get to the next step. So you're going to find out what those steps are and when it's going to happen. Neutrally ask, what are the next steps in your hiring process? Not about you, it's about them. And towards that, as you're there in the interview, focus how you can be of help to them. It's about them. Be yourself, be positive and flexible. Think of other situations when you're on your best behavior. That's how you want to be, but you do want to be yourself. And remind yourself that they invited you here. They want to fill that job just as much as you want to land it. And the more you prepare, the less reason you have to be nervous. The more you've prepared, the more you have an advantage over everyone else. You don't need to be perfect. You just to be better, less imperfect than anyone else. You know? And if you're focusing on their needs, takes the pressure off you. And that's what they want to happen anyway. Now, part of that preparation is not only be ready to answer those interview questions, but to anticipate what you're going to be asked. Okay? You have a job posting. It's not the gospel truth. You know, ask questions to learn more, but that's a good starting point before the interview. Know what the requirements are and say, okay, they're going to ask me about these 5 items. I'm going to make sure I've got some success stories ready. Know the company. Go to their website. It's going to be a biased point of view. Great, but know it. Look up news, look up other information. Get insight into that company. Know who the people are. Look in their LinkedIn profiles. It's public information. They put it out there for a reason. It's okay to look it up. And give yourself every advantage you can. It's okay to know what's on the test. So going to networking contacts, they'll give you a sense of how that company works, what the people are like. They may even know some of the personalities of the people. Look for contacts. Look up the company on Glassdoor. That'll give you that same insight, as well as perhaps learning about the interview process. Keep in mind that at times, reviews on Glassdoor about a company may skew a bit negative. Be mindful of where those reviews are coming from. It's a big company. Rarely are the same good things and bad things exist uniformly throughout an organization. And comments do tend to skew negative as well. So just be aware of that. Now, having done all that, if you do all of that well, have a clear job search with good goals, good resume, job search effectively, network a whole lot, interview effectively, you too will land the job. And believe it or not, even in these circumstances, people are successfully negotiating. You'll only be able to negotiate effectively if you believe you can. But let me assure you that the company has been polled on this, and 95% of HR people said they expect people to negotiate. Set yourself up to do this. Now, among the ways you want to set yourself up to do this is, as you first get asked salary questions, try not to pin yourself down to a specific number. Start by focusing on things other than the role. I'm excited about this job. It's a great company, a challenging role. The last thing I want to do is give an uninformed answer about salary that will stop me from pursuing it. Obviously, I'm going to have to fit within your range. What's the salary range for this position? Forces them to speak. And they say, no, I need to know an answer. Okay. Give them a range and give them a wide range. Use sites like salary.com or payscale.com or Glassdoor to gain some insight. Don't pin yourself in. Or if they say, oh, we're not sure of the range, it depends on the person. Say, great. That makes sense to me too. If they give you a range and say, oh, that sounds awful, don't tell them that. That will only tell them, I don't want this job. It's not what you want to say in the moment. Or can we make it a little bit better? No, you don't have the power to do that yet. You only get the power to negotiate after you've been offered the job. Because at that point, you are no longer among several people selling yourself for the job. Now you've completed the sale. And at the time after you've been offered the job and before you've decided to accept it, suddenly you become a buyer. And therefore, they have to convince you that it works. So the power has shifted in your favor. Use it, but use it wisely. And the first way to do that is to set yourself up to negotiate by responding to the offer. Your goal, 3 things. Be enthused about the job. Part of the reason why they offer to you is that you want the job. Be neutral, indifferent about the terms, and set up a follow-up of which they're leaving the call thinking, okay, I know that Liz wants this job. I heard that, but I don't know whether we offered enough to help her close the deal. I'm not sure of that. So that's what you want to make sure of. That's how you want to leave them. How does that sound like? So you get offered the job. Oh, wow, I'm really excited about the job because I'll get to use these skills, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. And I've always admired the blank organization, and I felt really comfortable with the manager and the people. So excited. Shift your tone. let me make sure I have the right facts. The title is this, the salary is this, the bonus is this. There's a full benefit package. How will I get the details on that? Okay, you'll send it to me a link later. Terrific. Okay, great. So what I want to do now is, get all that information, digest it, and I'd like to get back with you. Let's say you're getting a phone call yesterday, Wednesday. I'd like to get back to you no later than Friday with my thoughts and questions. Is that okay? So now the person's going, okay, Liz wants that job, but I don't know whether or not we close the deal. And you know that, listen, 2 days is reasonable, not because I say it, not because you think it. The person on the other end of the call said it. 2 days later, you're picking up the phone. You're reiterating why you're excited about the job. It's not, this is not you're not trying to be caught. You're trying to reiterate that. And then whatever you're asking for, and then you're saying, I do want to talk to you about the terms. Whatever you're asking for, you want to give a reason, either why it helps them or it's fair. What would that sound like? Well, in terms of salary, you might say, you offered me a salary of $60 a year. Based upon my prior salary or what I'm seeing in the marketplace, I'd like to improve that salary to $70 a year. Can you help me make that work? Now, someone may or may not give you that number, but it's impossible for someone, when you calmly say, can you help me make that work? And you've given a good reason why, they can't get mad at you. They know you're being reasonable. And the more bases, the better. And the more, you're not limited to negotiating salary. You could do that for a bonus, and tied to the fact that you're someone who's very performance driven. So the more your compensation is tied to performance, the better you will be. So I'd like to improve the bonus from 10 to 15%. Can you help me make that work? Even vacation is to their advantage. Now this is a very demanding job that's challenging and is going to take my full commitment. That's exactly what I'm looking for. That's exactly what I had at my last job. In that last job, I had up to 4 weeks vacation, and that was important. It gives me time to recharge myself. So I'd like my vacation to be based on my level of responsibility, not my tenure with the company. Can we improve the vacation time? Very calm, never a demand, always giving a basis, always asking for something with a reason. Okay, now that you've landed the job, let me pause and ask, sorry, I went a little bit over, and see if anyone has any questions. I am happy to take any questions that anyone has. And as I'm waiting for that, let me reiterate, I am more than happy to review each and every of your resumes. I would like you to do the work to follow the guidelines that I sent, and that's what we had it sent in advance. So, but please send it to me. And my email is right there. Take Control Job Search 2020 at yahoo.com. As we mentioned, find those resume and cover letter samples. I suspect you, Rosemary has been kind enough to grab the other people and send it to them who don't have it. But if not, I'm happy to send them. And I'm, as you will have this recorded, you'll have the opportunity to listen to this again, because I went through a whole lot of information that I often will spend literally a day going through, or several hours in an hour. So I thank you for your attention, but I am happy to answer any questions that anyone has. Are there any questions that people have? Rosemary, any questions?
I see Janaya, one of the people attending, raised her hand, and I'm unmuting her.
Great.
Janaya. Go ahead if you have a question, Janaya.
Hey, Janaya. Janina.
Janina, sorry.
No worries. Okay. I'm following you, Rosemary. Okay. Janina, you're still muted. So if you mute or type your question into the chat box, either way, I'll be able to answer it.
Let me see. I'm not sure what's happening. Oh, we have another raised hand. Let me see.
Janina, you should be able to see yourself.
Jane Moreno has a question.
Jane, please.
Go ahead, Jane.
Yes, Alan, I had listened to you with ACOR when you gave your presentation.
Sure.
I believe it was last month.
End of July.
I
Close enough.
I
Yes.
am going to be now sending you, not right now, but I will be sending you my resume, but I feel I'm going to need, after you look at it, probably a Zoom face-to-face or however you would like to do it. Is that acceptable? And there's reasons that I'm asking that,
Yeah,
that,
we'll make it work, Jane.
I'm
Whatever.
not going to go into now.
As long as it's reasonable in terms of
I
just a little bit
will, you
about
know
my
what?
time. I'm more than happy to do what I can to help. So
I will,
don't worry about it. Ask for it. We'll figure it out.
I will explain, I will explain in my email to you what I will be doing, and I'll attach the resume. How's that?
Sounds perfect. Sounds perfect.
Okay, so in the
Always good.
subject line, do you want NIAC library? What do you want in the
Yeah,
subject?
NIAC webinar, NIAC library. Yeah.
Okay,
No, that'll cue me in.
all right, thank you.
And Liz Santiago asked a question and shared it with all. During the time, I think it's more important to get your foot in the door as you look to grow or remain persistent to what fits in with your goals. The answer is going to depend on your circumstances. If you are not working at this time, you may say, okay, I'm going to focus on getting in the door with a good organization in less than a perfect job, because there's some degree, you don't want to let the perfect get in the way of the good, in this stormy time. But if you are working and securely employed, well, there's no reason that you want to then compromise for anything less than you want. So depends on your circumstances, which is why I'm certainly recommending that people look to land contract roles. So even if that contract role isn't exactly what you want to do, you're in the company, you're showing value, people are getting to know you, they see what a great worker you are. That's how you're going to best position yourself for the roles that you want. That's what I mean by that foot in the door also. So it'll depend on your circumstances. You want to look not to take several steps back in terms of a permanent role, because if you're doing that, then it could rebrand you for that role. But in a contract role, fine. Or if you're making a shift in terms of new direction or new industry, be willing to compromise a little bit, particularly if you're not working now. Now, you could always reset it as times get better to say, I made this with the hope that I would grow quickly, didn't grow as fast, so now I'm in the market again. People will be forgiving in 2021 of what you needed to do in 2020. Great question. Other questions? Janana, have you either unmute or type into chat? Others have questions. Patricia, please.
Hi, Alan, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Perfect. Hi, thank you so much for your talk.
My pleasure.
I'm just a little bit curious. So is there like a recommended amount of time, or is there a time that is going to count against you? Like, let's say you're in a job and you're only there for 8 months, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to alert the next person or the next HR person that, at whatever job that you're applying to? Is that like a red flag? Because I've kind of read and heard mixed things.
Mm-hmm.
About, spending a certain amount of time at a job before it's acceptable, let's say, to move on. So I'm just kind of curious to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. And the answer isn't fully black and white. So that's a great question. And so general rule, people looking to say, okay, you've lasted in that job at least a year. And even if it's only a year, they're going, okay, why are you leaving after that short period of time? And ideally that year is preceded by a longer tenure at a job. And in all likelihood, you probably, depending on the level of job, it may take you a year or two to have some accomplishments to be able to share on your resume effectively. And that's the other piece of it too. However, we're in a stormy time now. As I mentioned, that if you take a job now, or if you've taken a job recently that's less than perfect, and you look to move again next year, people will be, at least based upon what happened in prior crises, because I've been doing this long enough that I saw, post Hurricane Sandy, post Great Recession, post 2001, I saw all of it. And in 2002 and 2010, companies said, okay, I get why you were in that job less than a year, and you would have a good reason as to why you're leaving. I thought it would be this, it wasn't quite as good, so I'm entering the market again. But they're going to be more forgiving because they understand the time.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? I know it's a little, I went in several directions there. Does that clarify that?
No, it does. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Good. Any other questions?
There's one in the Q&A section from Lydia. For LinkedIn, I don't feel comfortable writing out all the bullet points of what I did at a job. I'm hesitant about putting all that personal information out there. Am I at a huge disadvantage on LinkedIn because I don't want to do this?
I get that a lot, particularly for people who are, don't enjoy using social media, and are, in general, have not used LinkedIn a lot. That's a pretty typical answer. Keep in mind a couple of things. You will have the ability to set some privacy settings. So you can choose who gets to see at what level of your background. So you get to manage that. And you get to put some detail of what you did. You're not including who you are personally. You're just including a couple of work details. So the same kind of information that's on your resume. You don't need to be too specific about the same kinds of results that you generated. But it's ideally you want to include some information about the work that you've done, because when recruiters are doing searches, the more those terms pop up, the likelier you are to be found. So when people look for people with my background, the fact that I have the word career coach and words like coaching there half a dozen times, they find me more frequently. So you want to give yourself that advantage. You're not including your personal information. You're not, including your reviews or necessarily specific tangible results. Just a little bit about the work that you do. Ultimately, it's sort of akin to what anyone who had that job title is doing. So it's, as you start to think through it, it may not be quite as personal as you might think. So I'm encouraging you to do that, but I get your hesitance. I get it. Good. Thank you for that question. I'm sure others have it as well.
And Lydia said thank you.
So, thank you. Good. Okay. So yeah, I'm past my time. So Carolyn, thank you. Okay, good. Any other questions? And feel free, if I have questions come to you as you're sending me your resume afterwards. So just send me a question too. I'm happy to answer it then also. Good.
I think there was one other person who raised her hand. Hold on a second. Oh, Patricia. Did you have another question, Patricia?
I did, but it's okay if we.
I'm happy to answer it.
We're here.
Okay.
Hanging out. Okay.
All right. It was just about LinkedIn. I was just kind of wondering what you think the best approach would be to initiating a conversation or networking with those people that are like 2 or 3 levels out.
Oh,
from the
wonderful
person
question.
that you know.
Yeah. No. If this session was 2 hours, you would have gotten that answer already. So thank you for asking. If you're starting with a second or third level person, so if the second level person happens to be connected as a first level person that you're close enough to say, hey, do you know this person? How do you know them? Reach out to them. If not, and that's often not the case, because you'll see who that mutual connection is. So if it's even a distant second level person, so the first level connection is not as close, or a third level of which you can't see that direct connection link, send that person a connection email, connection link, an invitation, connection invitation.
Okay.
And in it include a note that says, we have mutual contacts, or we're both connected to so-and-so. I'm interested in blank company, so I'd like to connect with you on LinkedIn. If that person connects, then you have their contact info, which likely includes their personal email. Send them an email. Subject line, recent LinkedIn connection. You know, and then ask, Jane, Jim, whoever it is, we just connected on, thank you for connecting on LinkedIn. I am interested in learning more about ABC company. I am on a job search. I don't expect you to know of a job, but would love just to get 10, 15 minutes to get some, basic background info. It's really going to help me a lot. Can we set up a brief call?
Okay.
So start by that first step of looking for a connection. If the people who say yes, they're buying in a little bit, send them an email, of which is a bold move. But guess what? You do that 5 times, 1 or 2 people will say yes. Okay, the other 3 or 4 are going to ignore you. So what? You're never going to be a burden to anyone. And those people who say yes, they want to help you. So you never will be a burden to someone.
Okay. Thank you
That make
so
sense?
much. Yes.
Good. Okay, good. So thank you for asking, because that answer was to everybody. Any other questions? Questions are only getting better. They're all good, so don't get me wrong.
I think
Jane,
Jane
did you have another
raised her
question?
hand. Yeah.
Oh, I believe there's one more session, isn't there?
Not that I'm aware of. And I'd be the one to know.
Okay.
No, there wasn't another session scheduled right now, Jane.
All right.
I
Thank
don't
you.
have any other schedule to any other organization, so
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd know it. I said I don't have attention to detail, but that much I know. All righty. Any other questions? But there will be a recording of this. Is that correct, Rosemary?
Yes, there is a recording, and I'll download it. There's a couple of steps, but it'll be available basically tomorrow morning.
Awesome.
Yep.
And where will people find that?
They can either, if they go to the nyacklibrary.org, our website, we have a page under our events heading of recorded events, recorded programs. And also, if you go to YouTube, there is a Nyack Library from Home page, or channel, I should say, a channel on YouTube, and it will be there as well. And if anyone has any issues finding it, just email me and I will point you in the right direction. I can actually send out a direct link to everyone who registered for the program, so that
how cool is
they
that?
will have easy access to it.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome. Thank you. That's awesome. That's
Thank you, Alan. This was incredibly useful and just so detailed and so helpful. And your generosity is wonderful, especially
Thank you.
during this
My
time.
pleasure.
We really appreciate
Glad I
it.
could be of help. Yeah.
Yes.
That'd be good. And please let me be of more help. All the participants, please send me your resume. I'm happy to be of more help. So I'll do so.
Yeah, if I were you, everybody who's looking for a job, take him up on that, because that's huge. It's huge to have someone look over your resume and help you out, because there's a lot of people hunting for jobs out there.
Yep. Sure.
Yep.
Good deal.
So thank you very much to everyone who came. And if anyone has any extra time, I have a 6-question poll that I'm just going to launch. We try to get feedback from everybody who comes to our programs, so that we know how they went, and if they have any suggestions for other programs. It's just very useful for us at the library to know what people respond to. So I just launched it. If you have a moment, just please, that would be great to get your reaction. But thank you, Alan, so much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it was great. And I will definitely pass your name along to a few other people in the library world, because I'm sure they'd be interested. Yes. All right. Good night, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.